Hello, everybody, and welcome to a exciting, fun-filled, expeditious episode of Radiorama, where I show you how to work on radios, much like the ones you see on the workbench. And we have three, and I'm not sure which one I want to restore. On the other hand, on one hand, we have this Hallicrafters with a weird kind of butterscotch paint job. Paint's in great shape, though. Usually the paint's kind of messed up, especially around the knobs. I've probably worked on about 5 or 6 of those, so I'm familiar with that. I have this really bizarre Fisher 100. It's a FM only radio with pre-selected FM stations. It still works and it sounds amazing. If I can turn it on here. So I thought about that and I was like, that's probably just going to be a pot cleaning job. So instead, I think I'm going to work on whatever this is. It says it's a junior, kind of a grubby old radio, and I was told it does not work. And I'm not sure if I'd really want to trust that cord with wire poking out here and there. That's a fire hazard. That's the only markings on it, except for the licensing agreement between RCA and this company, and I think Hazeltine Corporation. No clue who made it. If I was going to take a real wild guess, it's probably made one of and I get these letters confused. There was a whole bunch of factories in Chicago called Plant A, B, C, or whatever. They were just factories that mass manufactured radios for different companies. These companies would slap their label on it. This is probably a lower cost set because it only has 4 tubes, so it could be a TRF, but even if it's not a TRF, it's not going to be very sensitive. These radios are just fine. If you live like in a major city, you'll pick up at least the local stations. Usually I'd put a very long wire on them, as in we're talking 10, 15, 20 feet. So anyway, probably I will start working on this tomorrow, having guests coming over for barbecue, but I'm committed. This is the one. The finish is sure kind of tired, but I'm not going to refinish it. That would be kind of sacrilegious given this thing, how old it is. Welcome back to day 2, working on the junior radio / no-name radio. As old as this is, I'm not even going to try to bring it up on the Variac. It could do a lot of damage. You could damage the transformer. So I'm going to take the 2 screws that are holding it in and take a look underneath, see what's been done to it. I'd imagine it's probably had at least the electrolytics replaced in its lifetime, but who knows? Let's see. Well, it certainly looks like something that's been sitting in a barn, even though I know it wasn't. And it's had work done on it. These 2 electrolytics are replacements. Mallory, Philco, and it's been a very long time since this has been worked on. This is probably 1940s era electrolytics. Anyway, my parents just pulled up. We're having breakfast, so I'll have to put this on the side for now. All right, I'm back. Basically, today was Mother's Day, and so I spent the day with my mother. So, if any of you folks are watching, happen to be mothers, then happy Mother's Day. But now that I'm back, I took a little bit of a closer look at this, and I can tell there's actually 2 electrolytic capacitors. It'd be very easy, well, I don't think it'd be very easy in this case to confuse this, but you see it says 1010 MFD. That means there's 2 10 microfarad caps in there. And what the previous repairman has done, probably called for something greater than 10. Could be 15 or 20 microfarads. And so what they've done is they've put both of the positives together. And when you add 2 electrolytics together like this, put their positives and positives and negatives together, you double, or you basically you increase its capacitance. So this actually is functioning as a 20 microfarad capacitor. Likewise, this says it has 2 8 microfarad capacitors in it. So this is serving as a 16 microfarad capacitor. I don't have any 20 microfarad caps around. It's pretty loosey-goosey with replacing electrolytics. as long as the value of the capacitance is at or greater and the voltage is at or greater. Generally good. You shouldn't go to extremes. You could probably double your capacitance and it'll be fine. So what I'm going to do is I've got some 40 microfarad caps, and they're going to go in place of these two. And this, again, I do these shows sometimes, and I wonder, how did people in the day not burn their houses down? This has been spliced together so many times. And this cord itself is spliced onto, it looks like an original rubber cord. And that rubber cord, yep, that's not really rubber anymore. That's turned into a different element entirely. So I'm going to replace these two electrolytics and this cord, even though I am going to save that plug. I'll replace the cord with this guy. It even has kind of a vintagey looking plug on it. And then we will test it. There's not much going on in this guy, so I suspect that unless there's an issue with either the power transformer or a tube or something like that, it'll probably work. Alright, so let's go ahead and do some of this repair work. By the way, I'm trying to do a different format, and first of all, I cannot find my wire clippers. Where the heck do they go? Alright, never mind. Alright, let's go ahead and start replacing these electrolytics. A lot of times when you do this, it's just sort of about looking at it and trying to solve the puzzle, which is where you're going to put the new parts. And my rule of thumb is when you replace parts, you want to try to keep the leads of your components as short as possible. You don't want stuff just dangling around kind of like these guys are, even though it seems like the wire on these is pretty stiff, so who knows. So we have our replacements here, which are obviously way smaller than the old ones. Let me adjust my camera here. I'm still getting the hang of doing this on the fly like this. But sometimes you have to think about, okay, well, I know I want this new cap to be as close as it can be to its terminal strip or wherever it's located. This one is chassis ground. So what I'm going to do is attach a negative lead of the new capacitor here, and we're going to run a jumper wire to it. This is said jumper wire. Alright, so we're going to cut our negative lead, which is that guy with the stripe. It's always how you can tell what the polarity is. And it's going to hang it right here. There. And now we'll get my handy dandy soldering iron and some solder. And we'll solder that guy in. And then we'll clip the old lead of the negative of the old electrolytics. Trim its positive. And they're going to run, let's see, I'm going to hook the replacement jumper, well, the jumper cable right here. I'll squeeze in on that to get it nice and snug. And likewise, solder it in. Come on, get back there. I swear, soldering while recording is not the easiest thing to do. Okay. No, that's not good. It's coming loose. Always check your joints, because if you don't get that joint hot enough, you don't melt things together, then it's not going to make a good connection. That should be a lot better. Let's let that cool. Yeah, see, that's good. It's good and solid. Let's clean the excess out, and this guy is way too long. Clip the end of that. Of course, I dropped my pliers. There they are. I'll make a little loop-de-loop there. And then attach it to the positive of the new electrolytic, which is the unmarked side. Then we will clip the excess lead here. That Just fell. Good. Fell through the speaker and out the other side. Now this one's going to be a little bit easier because we know that because it's saying it's got two 8 microfarad caps inside, and here's the 2 leads, that's obviously the positive. This side is by default the negative. So we don't need to do anything fancy on this one. We can just do that number. So here's the negative. I know it's tempting to cut both leads, but time and again, if I'm not really paying attention, sometimes I'll forget which polarity went where. It'd be pretty stupid to do it on this one, but still, it's just habit. I'll solder one side, one lead at a time. Disconnect one lead of the old lead first, solder in the lead of the new lead. Then we know, well, still got my placement here. The only other logical conclusion is this is where positive goes. And this positive actually is looks like there's a cable jumping from there to there. So actually, we don't need to go very far at all. This can hang out over here. And it doesn't need near as much lead. So we clip that out of there. And then we will put that in place here and do our soldering to get that piece in. Kind of big, crude wiring in this thing. It seems like the construction quality of these Plant A or whatever it is. Robust. Okay. That's looking pretty good. So we got both the electrolytics replaced. And even though I do take chances with ratty cords, I'm not going to do that on this one. This is just too bad. So crunch out the old wire here. Whoops, sorry about that. I hit the camera. And then we'll run our new cord. Let me show you a little trick I do when I prepare these things. I'm going to cut down the middle. Huh, it's already split. How nice. And then what I do is I trim off an adequate amount. Actually, those are probably too long. That was silly. And then we're going to run the new wire through this grommet. Luckily, it looks like it's got a rubber grommet there that's still intact, which is good. And both of these are going to go about right here off the on-off switch. Let's pull this back a little bit. We don't need quite that much. Maybe just a little bit more. Let's tighten the knot a little bit. Alright, so we can remove this guy. My soldering tip is getting tired. These Metcals, I use mine very heavily, and it's good for maybe about 3 or 4 months, and then they start to peter out on me. And it's not particularly useful that we're on a big chunky 30s set. So what I do to make my life a little bit easier is I will wet, just basically, I'm not sure if soaking is the word, but I'm going to tin up both of the leads coming in from the new power cord. It's just going to make it a little bit easier when I install it, because if you try to cram these into the holes, usually the copper wiring will just splay out all over the place and make a big mess. So I'm also going to kind of maybe wet these guys up a little bit too, to add a little more solder. I'm going to make good juicy connections. Do the first one, go through the hole. And we'll take the other one. I can tell this one's going to be a bitch. There's already a wire going through it, so I'm not going to be able to shove it through the hole. But I can essentially saturate, just weld this whole area together. There we go. Huge glob of molten solder. Alright, so I'm going to dump the crumbs out of here. I'm going to hook it up to my isolation transformer and be prepared for smoke. Alright, so let's turn it around, because I want to see if there's any filaments. I'm prepared to yank this off in case it blows up. We've got filament. Well, like I said, it's not a sensitive radio. Let me undo the antenna, see if I can pick up anything. That is a no. Then again, let me turn this off. Transformer's good and cold. Sometimes these can be confusing sets because you'll think, oh, it's not working, but it also could be it's not a very good radio to begin with, so maybe I need to run a super long antenna off of this. Yeah, interesting. Volume pot directly connected to the antenna. Guess that's how they did it. All right, well, I took a precursory look. This guy is holding by a thread, so I need to reattach that. This tube does not really seem to be getting warm at all, and I could not see filament. Now granted, that doesn't mean anything. That could just mean the filament is not visible because the piping here is kind of pinched up in the top, and there's all this deposits on the side, so I can't see down in there. The other two are getting perfect filament. They're good. This one's definitely getting filament. It's quite warm. So what I'm going to do is repair this and check this tube. While I'm at it, I'll check this one as well, see what our health is, and then we'll give it another test. The other thing, when I was listening to it, it sounded like there was some distortion in the speaker, and I'm looking here, and there's some rips down here at this surround. So that means, you know, when it really gets going, that's going to vibrate. I think the speaker's otherwise fine. I can push in and out gently. I hear no rubbing, so I think it's a mechanical issue with that cone. Sometimes check the surrounds that hold the cone in. Sometimes this can come loose, and then, you know, whatever's loose will vibrate against the frame. So got a little bit of work to do. It kind of halfway acts like it wants to work. Again, I think it's partially due to the cheap nature of it, and it could also be we have a really tired set of tubes. And again, we've only replaced 2 capacitors. It could be the rest of the paper caps are most definitely leaking and doing awful things. So anyway, I'll shut up and we'll go to the next stage here. I get a feeling this is a kitchen radio. Usually this stuff just wipes off, and even if it's nicotine, it'll come off, but that's baked on greasy goodness. Probably explains why this radio has this overall appearance. I think it's kind of had a hard life. Anyway, it's time to test all the tubes on my Hickok tube tester here, my lovely TV7 that I've had for years. If you're going to go into this as a full-time hobby, I highly recommend getting one. Yeah, they're more money, but they'll never wear out, and they're good and accurate and indestructible. Well, right off the bat, my output tube is showing as shorted. Tests good, but then when I do my short tests, that's shorted hard. Anyway, looks like I'll have to get another one. Okay, so I tested all the tubes. Only the output tube was bad. The others were in pretty good shape. I did glue up the speaker a little bit here. I installed a new pilot light. and the results are mediocre, I'd say. Let it warm up just a little bit. There we go. We're starting to get some reception. Now, granted, it doesn't have a very long antenna on it, but I can hold it with my hand. See if we're going to pick anything up at all. It's funny, it was working just a minute ago.
Take action. And here Abby responds, Tom,
You're a caring and wise friend who's surrounded by perpetual...
I think that
It works, but it sounds god-awful. First of all, I still think there's some mechanical thing happening with the speaker. It's causing it to make this noise. It's like it's not... Let me see if I thump it. Does it do it? No, not really. Now, before I do anything else, before I decide to go off into diagnostic land, as old as this is, you know, if it was a set from the 50s, I'd be like, nah, those caps are probably okay, even though I'm going to replace them all. But most of them would probably be sort of usable. These guys are probably completely toast. So next thing I'm going to do is replace the rest of these capacitors. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 capacitors. And they're all marked pretty clearly. Good idea to unplug the radio before I start poking my fingers on there. 1/10 of a microfarad, 1/10 of a microfarad, 1/10 of a microfarad. Probably the same value here. Oh, there's another one hidden underneath here. What does that guy say? Well, it's glued itself to the side of the chassis. I'll be able to peel it back and see what that value is. Right, so I've replaced about half the capacitors so far. And I wanted to see if I've got any improvement here. I might also start doing some preliminary alignment of the RF transformer over there. I feel like this guy takes a little while to warm up for some reason. Getting a little bit of AC hum. Got a few old caps still left in there that could have something to do with it.
city in the country, Frey says, is no...
Identity threats. No one can prevent all identity theft or monitor all transactions of all businesses. But with LifeLock, it's easy to help protect yourself. Save up to 25% off your first year at LifeLock.com with promo code NEWS.
If you're with Verizon...
You've been listening to KCBS In-Depth. Get every episode by subscribing on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, and other podcast platforms. Visit KCBSRadio.com for more news and interviews. We are the Bay Area's news station, KCBS. 8:15 in KCBS. Push for traffic with Joe Hughes.
Yeah, we are starting in Rio Vista. We've had some trouble on Highway 12 and 160 at the Rio Vista Bridge. There was an earlier issue with the bridge stuck open after opening up to allow a ship to pass underneath. Then we had people turning around in traffic. This caused a crash involving a wrong-way driver. Right now we've got delays on 160 heading in the northbound direction. It looks like that's where our heaviest traffic is, but this has definitely thinned out considerably in the last half an hour. Otherwise, still looking at delays for the ride into San Francisco. Getting out of the city looking good, but coming in, you're going to find traffic jamming into the downtown stretch of I-80. Next look at the roads coming to you at 9:08.
Starting to behave more like a radio, but again, got a lot of old caps in there. They need to be replaced. So we'll bring it back up again once we do that, and we might need to touch up the alignment again. All right, so we all recapped here. And what I'm going to do next is clean the volume control, which is this guy here. And I'm going to squirt some juice down into its innards. Work that around a little bit. Already feels a lot better. Flip it over. Oh, look at that. Some of that cleaner got up into the tuning condenser, but we're going to go ahead and try it out again and see if we have any sort of change. Hopefully change meaning change for the good, as in the performance will be better, since all those rotten capacitors are now cut out. There were 2 of them in there that were squished. They were held in a bracket. And over the years, you see how it just kind of like turned into an oval. That probably means it wasn't really doing much of any capacitating anymore. I don't get why this takes so long to warm up, but there's not many tubes to warm up per se here.
Conditions tonight with winds gusting up to 35 miles an hour. 2468751.
Much better reception.
About 50 for those 60. Mike is remodeling the old family drive-in movie theater. Film the Delphi front of house cast and behind the scenes crew.
Hey, can we talk staffing real quick? I'm thinking at least 6 per shift.
Indeed.
Let's see if I can do some more touching up on that alignment.
With quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job description. Visit Indeed.com/credit and get $75 towards your first sponsored job. Terms and conditions apply. Of all the multitudinous manifestations that water contains, in oceans and ice cubes, in glaciers and streams, vapors and rain, double black diamonds, mountains and plains. Is already gaining in popularity, but the pandemic has really boosted the practice of psychedelic tourism. CBS's Megan Goldsby explained. This is a new spin on the phrase "have a good trip." Vacation or spa retreats where people use psychedelic drugs like mushrooms or ayahuasca.
What the pandemic has done is we've spent 2 years sat at home, and there has been a major mental health crisis for obvious reasons. And consumers have spent a lot more time thinking about their mental health, thinking about wellness, which is now around a $3 trillion industry.
Master.
I'm just looking at the map of interconnects with LA County, and holy
This set clearly has no automatic gain control whatsoever. You go from one channel to another and the volume can be blasting out of your ears on one and barely able to be picked. This is the nature of sets like this, unfortunately. Yes, it's a radio. It will pick up local radio stations okay. If you needed something that just could tell you the weather and maybe give you a baseball game or something like that, well, this was the radio for you. But I think electronic-wise, I've done what I want to do for this evening. There's a few more things I want to touch up on it, but I think I'm going to get to the cabinet and at least clean some of the grubbiness off of it. All right, well, now it's time to work on the cabinet, and you know, I don't know what's drawing me to this radio. It is really homely, but it looks like it's had a really hard life, and I do believe this is the original finish on it. Someone might have touched this up, or maybe it's just how it was made at the factory. I don't know. The cabinet is almost homemade looking. Pretty sure it's not. Let's see if it's got any markings on it. No, I don't think it's a homebrew. I don't think it's a homemade cabinet. I think it's just a really, really homely cabinet design. Anyway, what I'm going to do is scrub it down with Old English and a little steel wool. Because if I had to scrub the tubes in the sink to get all the kitchen grease off of it, I'm going to have to do the same with the wood here. Looks like someone took a pencil to it at some point. If I can't get that out, big deal. Who cares? It's part of the set's history. Okay, so this is after a pretty severe scrubbing with steel wool and Old English. I got a lot of the grub off. Anyway, this is not what you want to finish with, because when you're done with the Old English, this glossiness will disappear as the oil evaporates. If you want to bring back some of the gloss, even though I don't think this had a particularly glossy finish, but to continue cleaning the surface and maybe do it a little more gently and add some sheen to it, I'm going to use an old-fashioned Carnauba paste wax for cars. It's just a natural plant-based material. I don't particularly like using the synthetic stuff, but I use an old sock, and it takes quite a bit of elbow grease. I'm not going to film it because it's practically like watching paint dry, or like literally like watching someone wax a radio. So imagine the next time you see this, it'll be probably an hour into the future. All right, welcome back to the last day of working on the Junior. This is probably about as good as I'm going to be able to get this case. It's just like the radio, the chassis, it's really worn out. So it's also a type of chassis where I'm not going to be able to run my infamous audio input through it. So it's just going to be a radio. You know, it's fine. They all don't have to have the audio input feature. So I'm going to reassemble it and then move on to the next radio. Maybe I just felt sorry for this one, but let's put it back together and give it a final test, and it'll go out the door. So if someone wants just an honest-to-God AM radio, maybe to listen to the ball game, this is the radio for them. All right, so we got it kind of working again.
Earnings reports for mentions of weak demand, and that's up. It'll
be good if he pitches, but we don't know how long he's going to pitch because he's had some issues with the arm.
It does not like the LED lights in my garage. In fact, I had to turn a lot of them off just to get it to quit humming like that. So, kind of a disappointing episode. I'm sorry. Again, this is kind of a radio in the most crudest sense of the word, but it works if someone just has to have a beat up old AM radio. Well, this is it. I'll probably put it in the back in the handyman / rough radio section, if there is such a thing. All right, well, I'm on to other things. I think the next radio I'm going to restore is going to be this little helicopter sitting on the floor here. Either that or I'll work on this Fisher. I can't make up my mind. That. I think I'm going to work on the helicopters.